Hi, everybody. Oh, that's good. Before we begin the proceedings, I would just like to acknowledge and pay respects to the traditional owners upon the land in which we meet, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. It is upon their ancestral lands that the University of Sydney is built. And the Chau Chak Wing Museum is in a really very particularly important site. It was a kangaroo ground which gently made its way down to Blackwattle Bay. So it's a really important site for Gadigal people. And I'm now delighted to, I don't believe she needs an introduction, but introduce you to Consuelo Cavaniglia, who's been almost like an artist in resident with us here at the Chau Chak Wing Museum for about 12 months, a little bit over 12 months. And Consuelo has exhibited extensively across Australia with key solo exhibitions in Perth at PICA, Gertrude Contemporary, University of New South Wales Galleries, and in 2019 she was included in the inaugural Macfarlane Commissions at the Australian Centre for Contemporary Art. She studied at the University of Western Australia, Curtin University, and in 2017 she was awarded a Master of Fine Art from Sydney College of the Arts here at the University of Sydney. And she's represented by a station. I'd like to welcome Consuelo, and I should tell you who I am. I'm Katrina Liberiou. I'm the Assistant Curator of the Art Collection here at the Chau Chak Wing Museum, and we worked on this exhibition together. So welcome, Consuelo. Thank you. Just okay. So I just wanted to start off a conversation. We're going to kind of flip between the two of us, but we're going to take questions at the end. Apologies if I'm constantly doing this because it's for reading, but not long distance. So I just wanted to start by saying there's several aspects to this project, which we'll get to as the discussion unfolds. But I wanted to start actually talking about an unrealised aspect of the project. And so in our early discussions, Consuelo spoke a lot about legacy and having a lineage of practice and having a practice that you pass on kind of to the next artist. And what I particularly liked was your idea about dedicating your objects in the exhibition as an ode to women. And this was going to be more of a physical aspect. And just wanted to talk, if you could talk a little bit about what that was going to be about.
Yeah, look, I think one of the things is to say that the show overall is about perception and framing. So I was thinking about, the title, obviously, so to think about the way that we see things and the way that we look at things. And I guess that's been part of my practice overall, thinking about our relationship to space, the way that we locate ourselves in space, and then thinking about the way that space is structured and our relationship to those structures, whether they are architectural or physical, or if they are social or cultural structures. So with this exhibition, I was thinking about the idea of, and I have been for, I guess it's just the way that I practice. I think about the way that we relate to other people, and I think a lot about community. And it's not only my practice and the way that I work as an artist, but also how I work as a curator, and I guess in my role as a lecturer. And I also run an experimental art space in Marrickville. And so that's part of the way that I work, is about these kind of communities and bringing these kind of communities together. So I was thinking about the things that sustain us, and me particularly, and how that sort of, seeing through you is also about the people who came before us, I guess, or who came before me, and the way that they help me shape the way that I see my practice and the way that I think and the way that I approach things. So it was a sort of an ode to, I guess as I was making the work, I was thinking about those people and the people who I literally have conversations with, and who input into my practice. Many friends who are here, and also the people who I'm in conversation with as artists, but they don't know I exist or they are no longer alive. But I feel like as an artist, I'm in conversation with them. So I was thinking about making these works in conversation, especially with women artists, and thinking about that lineage and I guess that feminist mode of practice of acknowledging the people whose shoulders you stand on, but also to think about it as a kind of a fluid, not a lineage as in beginning, middle and end, but as in the threads that kind of tie us together. So.
That's cool. And in terms of how that was going to physically manifest in the museum, do you want to elaborate on that, or?
Yeah, so in the museum, initially I was thinking, and I guess it's sort of, yeah, some things work and some things don't. I was thinking of initially making, like using the actual language of the museum, so the tags that are on artifacts, and using those tags, those physical tags that then have a little string, and tying them to my works, to the works that I made that are downstairs. But writing a kind of an ode. So for Huma, for, Carol, for Helen, for all of the people. So thinking about, and maybe even just having a first name as this kind of intimacy that I kind of feel like I have with them in the way that I make and that I'm in conversation with them. But then when we were actually installing and I put all the works out, if you've already been downstairs, you'll see that there's quite a lot of work. And then when I started putting the labels out, I was thinking, no, I can't do this. So it's not that, maybe I would say that it's not necessarily unrealized, but it's definitely in the work and it's how I made the work, but it's maybe not manifest to other people. And afterwards we thought about maybe doing things like, could there have been another label on the wall that had a list of those names? Sean's excellent suggestion. We haven't done it yet, but there's a few sort of ways of thinking about how that might have happened. But in that testing, or in the sort of putting the show together, it didn't work, and it was fine. I think it's one of those things that as you work, some things. I guess a lot of the show actually only came together while I was putting it together in sight. There's not a lot of things that I was able to fully test beforehand. And that happens quite frequently, I guess, in my work because I work site specifically, so you can't always fully test everything beforehand. So when you come into the space and you're testing or, putting things together, then I try and keep a sense of flexibility and change things that don't work when you're in the space. So.
I should also mention that Consuelo was the first artist to be invited to intervene into the museum's architecture. So the Penelope Gallery projects on the bottom level were really, until Consuelo came along, confined to that smallish gallery. It's a nice working space, and it wasn't until Michael D'Agostino, our new director, came early last year that he said, let's go big. So that kind of brings me to the question around site. And I was interested to hear in terms of how did the site inform your thinking for the project, in terms of did the idea for the project come first and the site second, and what sort of were some of the opportunities and challenges that working with this site presented?
There's probably a few strands to an answer to that question. Firstly, I guess, you're invited to do an exhibition. It was a big exhibition for me. There was we were sort of talking about it being a year in the making, and that's always quite, I don't know, it feels like a generous amount of time to be working on a project and to be able to think through things and test things and so on. I also applied for funding and I got Creative Australia funding for the project, which is also incredible because then it allows you to work with manufacturers. It allowed me to go to Canberra Glassworks, and I'll talk about glass a little bit later, but to go to Canberra Glassworks and work with glass, which is not the cheapest thing to do. So having a grant, it allows you to do those things. So I had those things in place, or they sort of came to be in place over the course of the project. And I guess I always, as I said before, I always deal with space and our relationship to space. So coming in, to begin with, Katrina invited me to respond to one work by Lily Greenham, which is in the Penelope Gallery on the wall. And in that space. And then, yeah, as Katrina said, you know, the conversation changed, and it was like, let her go through the building and let her go through the collection, through the whole collection. And so that was amazing. I haven't worked with collections extensively, and it was really great to be able to go, you know, the collection, the Chau Chak Wing collection is pretty exceptional. So, you know, the visits to the collection store and the visits to conversations with the collection curators, the various collections. So antiquities, working with, I probably didn't do that so much actually. It was more the optical instruments, the glass, a whole bunch of different things. And it was incredible to work with those people because the level of knowledge they have about these histories and these objects is incredible. So those kind of exchanges and conversations also shaped the project. And it started me thinking about the types of things that I was doing and what I could do with the responses to the things that were here. So the collection was one of the things. And then, of course, the space itself. So a beautiful building. The architecture is exceptional. I look a lot at architecture when I research my work. And so to be able to respond to this architecture was quite unique. One of the first things that we did was to go up into the ceiling. So the ceiling, so that's us in the ceiling. You can actually walk around these forms in the ceiling. So everyone was like, oh, it must have been really hard. You were working at height. And it's like, no, I wasn't at all. We're actually just walking around, and they're only about at waist height, these forms. And we basically stretched the fabric over them like a canvas. It was actually quite straightforward.
Yeah, it was so ridiculously simple in the end.
Yeah, it really was. But so I was thinking about this kind of intervention with the space, and I felt quite a sense of responsibility, thinking that the show was going to be up, and it's going to be up until early next year, so that it would be up for a long time, and that, you know, people would be living with this space, and or these interventions in this space, and the way that I work in any case is not sort of super loud in the work. So I wanted to have something that had a level of subtlety, but also shifted that perception. So just by shifting the color in the atrium to bring this yellow into the space, thinking about things like, you know, that maybe some people might not even recognize that there's a work there, that it's not always super visible. So people have walked into the building, into the atrium, and not really realized that the fabric, the yellow fabric, is an artwork, is part of the exhibition. So I guess there was all these sort of responses to, I was thinking, maybe one of the first things that I was thinking in relation to the museum was, how do we see through the museum? It's such a place of display, but it's such an opaque space as well. And there are so many parts of the building that are not accessible. And there are so many histories that are only seen through a particular lens. So I was thinking about how do you not shift the way that we see it, but actually be aware of the way that you look. And so I sort of created these interventions that all speak about lenses and apertures and openings and viewing spaces and things like that. And then one of the other things that was also part of the way that it shaped the museum was also the restrictions of the museum. So to begin with, I came in with my little visual diary full of ideas, and it was like, no. I was like, okay. And then, you know, even in the galleries downstairs, all the objects are within acrylic cases. And that wasn't my choice. It was basically Katrina, no.
I have, yeah. I
said, look, everything has to be in a case. Things can't be just on a table. And I never put things on tables because for me, the work is always about this sense of like being active and being in flux rather than being fixed. And the way that I make the work is always just really simple, like a base with something slotted in there, and you could easily pick it up, move it around, shift things around. So the idea of having them within these cases was a bit of a shock to start with. But I had to give in. There was no way around it. And even other things like within the space, like for me, the way that I set up spaces with circulation of the audience is really important. And even that was sort of restricted in terms of, you know, you have to have 1.2 meters between all the objects in the space. And suddenly that really sort of defined how the space needed to be set up. So there was a few of those restrictions that you think, all right, well, I'm working in this institution, that's what I need to do.
Yeah, there's that language of museums that kind of, I think, came through quite heavily in terms of the what ended up being in the Penelope Gallery being glass, a lot of glass, and being incredibly fragile. And we have a ridiculous number of school groups that come through here. And so there's a decision very early on to make nothing sort of on open display, if you like. So yeah, it was a challenge. And I think that was something that we kind of had, you know, as a process of negotiation and discussion, but we got through it. And I think you kind of just went, right, I'm going to bring the cases, as you said, rather than intervene into showcases. We've got many of them in this museum, to bring the cases into the space. And I think that was a really kind of great solution in a way, brought them all together. In terms of the fragility of the exhibition, just thinking a little bit more about materiality, and you're working with glass, I'll just move on to this group of slides here. We've talked a bit about glass and the fact that you use it in an unconventional way, or a way that a glass maker would not necessarily approach glass making. Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but and I think certainly with groups of students that we've had coming through in the last couple of weeks, they've been really interested in how you've used glass in a way that you know, is different to maybe what they expected. Do you want to talk a little bit about the process of your glass making?
Yeah, for sure. So these are just tests with kiln form glass on the left-hand side. Oh, but all of them actually use glass powder. So a lot of the panels that you see downstairs are actually made of glass powder that has been compressed and kiln formed. Yeah, I do use glass unconventionally. There's a couple of people here who have been working in glass work, so you know the glass making process, and we all come to glass without being glass artists. I've been working with glass for a long time, with industrially produced glass. So in working with, again, ideas of perception and, with ideas of perception, I like the quality of glass for the fact that it's transparent, and float glass for the fact that it's transparent and reflective. There's that sort of original mystery of float glass as something that does both things, and that, you know, the way that it was used in architecture to allow access, or visual access, or not, or block visual access. And I use mirror a lot as well. So I've done that for a long time. I've used those materials for a long time. And then just before the COVID lockdowns, the Canberra Glassworks invited me to do a residency to work with handmade glass. And it was something that I had never thought about. It never crossed my mind. It wasn't something that was remotely in my thinking that I would ever actually think about handmade glass. Because it felt like something that was so technical, that it was so removed from the things that I knew, that it required a lot of skill, it required a lot of, equipment and things like that. And then I went to Canberra Glassworks, and I worked with a glass blower and a kiln form artist. So artist who works with kiln form glass, and they're totally different ways of working with glass. And that completely changed the way that I thought about it as a material and the potential of glass, and really sort of moved even my work from something that was often quite sharp and hard-edged to that softness of handmade glass. It was quite an extraordinary shift in thinking about this material and the types of things that you can do. And I think Canberra Glassworks, the creative director, Amy Frodsham, is a really visionary person who brings us non-glass artists into the mix of voices that go through the Canberra Glassworks, and there's this terrific exchange because we are asking things of the material that a person who comes through glass art would not ask of the material because they know that it doesn't work. So again, and we're like, but why? And so like that, yeah. So trial and error, things break often, things that are, too cold. When I made this one on this side here, I used this kind of reclaimed glass that nobody wanted to touch because glass artists want to have everything very precise and want to be able to make something over and again to absolute precision. And I was like, yeah, I'll throw it in the kiln, then I'll have a look at what happens. And it didn't work. It just ended up with this very sort of snot-like kind of panel. It was, everyone was like, oh, Con, what did you make?
Because it's also about the process for when you described, you were working on them as we were working together, and you were saying how it's a process of letting go and being happy with when things break. They break kind of very dramatically, things don't work out, and you invest a huge amount of time and energy and cost of materials, and then you're kind of like, okay, well, I'll take it in this direction. And I think you certainly see that downstairs. I think there's another one. Oh yeah.
Yeah, this was some testing that I was doing in the studio with colours and just thinking about. I guess so over the arc of the time that we worked on the show, it was thinking about bringing different elements together and working with different colours and having a look at what they did. And I had Lily Greenham's work in my mind and thinking about the way that she looked at colour in her work and the relationship between coloured light and an object, or coloured light and a coloured object. And the way that light sort of travels through, it's kind of everywhere in the show. Obviously, the ceiling is really reliant on light traveling through a colour filter. But also, I guess one of the other things that I got to do with this show is to work with a lighting designer who helped to source the lights to then be able to do the coloured light work in the cabinets downstairs. That was really great as well. Yeah, that's it there. It's been there. Yeah.
There's a really nice kind of connection between your interest in legacy and a lineage of practice and the work of Lily Greenham and Martha Boto, who would be respectively 199. So Lily Greenham was born in 1924 in Vienna, and Martha Boto was born in Argentina in 1925. And I think the fact that you honed in on their work very early on, I introduced you to Greenham, but in terms of thinking about artists and women artists who are working at the sort of height of the kinetic movement in Paris in the 1960s, there weren't that many of them. There were only a handful, and often they were included in the same exhibitions. They're represented by the same gallery. And we managed to get their work in Australia through the Power Bequest, which is a very large donation the university received in 1961, with the first acquisitions made in 1967 of Boto and Greenham. So these were the two two artists selected in that inaugural year to represent what was the latest and greatest ideas of contemporary art, which was the terms of the Power Bequest. And the fact that we're showing them again in the sort of centenary of their birth is fabulous. And do you want to talk a bit about what sort of drew, you've talked a little bit about Greenham in terms of how she used light, but is there anything in particular you want to discuss regarding Martha or her use of kind of mirrors and light and perception? And I think where, for me, what really resonates your practice with their practice is the sort of fourth dimension, time, or the audience and the participant or the spectator, and how that's a really integral part in terms of viewing your exhibition, but also viewing their works.
I mean, I think Lily Greenham was through your introduction. So Katrina is writing a master's thesis on Lily Greenham. And so the way that you introduced me into her was Katrina was super animated. There was a lot of information. It was really great. Like the way that you talk through her history and this really captivating person, really mysterious person as well, who sort of changed identity over her life. And, you know, it was a really exceptional kind of introduction into a person's work that you gave. And so she was this, I mean, you invited me to respond to her work, and I thought, absolutely, it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And then Martha Boto's work was, I guess, again, going through the collection and seeing these works, but also, you know, there's a lot of work that in the collection that is about light and movement, kinetics, and light and, I guess, perception as well. But maybe not a mountain of it by women. And so I sort of was like that one and that one. And just kind of, but I also, I think when I find other artists who are dealing with the same things that I'm thinking about, I get really excited about it. And so I think in seeing the way that they were working, it was like, oh my gosh, we're talking about the same thing. This is so exciting. And there was some clear connections for me around the way that they dealt with a whole bunch of things. And so I really wanted to be, again, in conversation with them in the show.
And material, the use of materials and your use of materials is quite wonderful, that continuation. And I think people will really kind of respond to that wonderful connection between perception that you get from the moment you walk through the museum front doors. And actually, I should just cycle back a bit, because I didn't, where there was a large, that's the installation in process. But there's also another component, which is extending your use of glass to all the glass surfaces. And I think it'd be good to kind of cover that a little bit too.
These are just studio tests, again, just thinking about what are the materials that I could get, and talking to manufacturers and finding different types of materials and then testing them and seeing what happens when you overlay this color with this one. And then this is the install.
Beautiful.
It was vinyl takes a little moment to settle. So I think after the first day, there were bubbles in all of the vinyls, and everyone was deeply stressed, especially the vinyl manufacturers or the installers, because they're absolute perfectionists and they're amazing to work with. And they were like, what do we do? How do we fix this? And blah, blah, blah. And then it just settled. It just, just relaxed and settled, and now it's fine. Yeah. But the first day, everyone was deeply stressed. There were all these big bubbles that started to form.
So really, that's the first, you encounter your work before you enter the building, which is a really, really wonderful thing. And I love how, as you traverse the building, aspects of that part of the project really come into play, and you can always sort of reference it no matter where you are in the building, as well as the wonderful lantern, which the colour actually kind of softly, gently filters all the way down to the bottom level, which was also part of Consuelo's thinking, I think, to sort of draw the visitor down into the Penelope Gallery, which is really the anchor for the project, but it's to connect the two aspects. Yeah, it's worked really well.
I think with these also, I was thinking about color mixing in space. So how these colors might sort of look as you sort of see them from different spots. And I was thinking about them as kind of invitations to kind of look through the architecture in a particular way, to position yourself to look through in different ways, and maybe even not to sort of take for granted the things that are in the space and in the architecture and the structure.
Yeah. There's another view. Very beautiful. Okay, voices. So there's another aspect of Consuelo's project, which you may not be aware of, because it's quite subtle, is that her engagement with the museum extended to the staff. And so we had a number of conversations with staff in groups and individually, which was really enlightening, actually. I learned a huge amount about my colleagues that maybe I hadn't known before. You want to talk a little bit about kind of what that experience was like for you as an artist, and what you learned from all the conversations, wonderful conversations that we had.
I mean, these are labels that are around the building. There's about 17 or 18 of them, and they are throughout. So from the entrance all the way to, well, all floors. In the lift, different places, you'll see them. So they're yellow. So there's this idea of connectedness between them, and the designer cleverly connected them to the yellow of the ceiling. So to sort of find this kind of understanding that they were part of the same thing. But they are, we call them sort of unofficially the voices, because it's basically the staff, voices of the staff. So I invited women and gender diverse people on staff to respond to the building, or to talk about the building and their experience of being in the museum or part of the museum on staff. So I was thinking about, I guess it builds on a tradition of artists who, again, have looked at the things that are unseen within institutions. So it's been done in many different ways. But I was thinking about this idea of if you encounter the museum, often you encounter things through didactic labels, and obviously they have a particular language. So what if you were to encounter these histories that are within the museum through a different filter? Again, this idea of a different perspective. So the provocation or the question or the invitation was quite minimal to staff, but basically, a number of people responded, and they some of the responses are really minimal. There's a little verse. There's some of them are playful, some of them are a little bit more critical. But it's a lot of it's staff like the maintenance staff, the security staff, the people who who are here all the time also and know the building better than anyone else. And they also experience the museum and the people who come into the museum much more so than a curator, much more so than, people who are in the offices and so on. And so this person who is constantly there is not the person who we talk to. And in fact, often they're the people who are invisible. And so I wanted to be able to talk to them about their voice, to sort of bring out their voice. And through that, we had really great conversations. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about that is, that people said, oh, I didn't know that you were actually practicing artist as well. Oh, I didn't know that this person did this and that. So there was a nice sort of between the staff conversations that emerged. And then Katrina took me through to speak to people as well. So we had really great conversations. Some of them don't come out in these labels, but there were a really nice exchange as part of the project. And the other thing is that I can walk into the building and pretty much know everyone by name, and they all come and talk. So I've had long moments with people in, in the gallery, people saying, oh, I took these photos of your work today, and I really liked this aspect of it. And last week I spent this much time in your space, and these are the photos that I took, and sort of showing me the things, and these are the mostly the security staff. Yeah. And
I think on my own personal level, my they're all my colleagues. I have a huge amount of respect for everybody I work with, but the sort of level of deeper connection with people has been a really wonderful thing. And I feel like I have a lovely friendship with Susmita, who you'll see in a minute, and people who you talk to, wave to, hello, but you may not have known much more until you've and actually Sian was a really integral person in kind of connecting us up with Susmita's hidden talent, which we didn't know about. So I think that's the conversation that you instigated made us all start talking, and that was a really great thing. And I think the staff really appreciated it, and having the opportunity to bring their voice into the exhibition, which we had one staff member kept saying to us, I never would have thought I'd ever have this opportunity. would never have imagined I would be invited to do something like this. And it was just, really wonderful. And do you want
Susmita is part of the maintenance team, I guess.
Yeah.
And she is, so most of the staff responded in text, but Susmita is an amazing TikTok dancer. So she said, I'll do this, but I actually would like to do a couple of TikTok videos. So this is hopefully when you go back out into the building and you see the work,
you'll think of her.
You'll think of her. Yeah. You'll see the steps in a different way.
And there's another one, because there's not just dancing.
Yeah.
There's So
she directed us, and she got us to do different takes until she was happy, and she chose the locations. She even got us to do a little dance, but we decided not to.
I didn't bring that. I didn't put that one on. But we did actually do one in the ceiling, which was very funny, but huge, highly embarrassing. Yeah. That kind of brings us to the end of the formal kind of discussion. But I think we're open to having some questions if anyone has something that they'd like to ask. I'll get you a... Oh, Julian's got it. Thanks, Jules. Any questions? I can start you off with one that I got from a student during the week, actually. So the wonderful thing about being on campus is we have a number of classes come through, and we got a question this week from a student who wanted to know why you don't individually title your objects, that the exhibition, your projects are named as one thing rather than seeing through you and etc. So, yeah. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Can't do it.
Can't do it.
I don't know what it is. It's just I always name, like titles are really important for shows. And I always title shows, but I find it really difficult to title individual works. It's just, and it drives people insane because then you're trying to refer to a work and they're all untitled. So, yeah, that's short answer.
Are you planning to do? Are you planning to continue working with glass? Are you going to go back to Canberra Glass Works?
Yeah, I've got a bit of glass down there still, and I've been a few times now, but yeah, I'd like to, and I'm getting a little bit better at doing things on my own as well. So I can actually put a kiln on and do a program and understand the temperature and stuff like that I need to put stuff in. But it's just like, I was just talking to Linda before, who has just done a residency at Canberra Glassworks, and you know, she was saying I can understand why you're so excited by it, because you go in and it's just like this whole new world and you just want to keep going back and doing more. I don't know. I mean, I guess in some ways, you know, there's a sort of like these feel like the works downstairs feel like they're kind of finished and not finished. And I think that was part of the way that I wanted to deal with a museum as well, as in not something that comes to an end in the museum, but something that was an open kind of question as a work, that they're almost model-like, so maybe not complete. And I wanted to have that kind of vitality in the work as well. But I guess it's kind of the way that I work. Maybe, I don't know how, I mean, maybe I'll get better skill-wise, but I don't know if that's going to make it more finished or more, yeah. Or maybe it's just that sort of sense of the experiment is just always in the work, yeah.
I was interested in this restriction, the vitrine. I mean, some artists have worked with vitrines, but can you talk about your reflections now, having worked in that situation, and how you might apply it as you continue to make art?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny because I've had a few conversations with people saying, are you going to show the work again? Because I'd really like to see it not with a vitrine. And then I told them the story of of having to work with the vitrines. I guess my response to the vitrine was to do the double vitrine by putting the coloured kind of perspex boxes in there. I was like, if you want me to put a box, I'm going to double it and put two. But I don't feel like it's necessarily the way that I want to work. It's not something that I feel like, oh, this has opened up something for me. I think that display, the idea of the conventions of a display is something that I do work with, because I think a lot about supports for sculptural work and things like that. But it doesn't feel like something that has opened up a kind of a wonderful new sense of investigation for me, no.
Anybody else? Oh, Sham. For our recording, for posterity.
Just the wonderful, when you just said the opening up a wonderful sense of investigation for you. Do you have any elements of the project that you feel really excited? There's so many juicy bits in it in terms of like the overarching feminist practices that you're looking at inside that, also the context of that within like quite a masculine building, quite a like male dominated history, and that, like, has there been any juicy bits from this project that you're really excited to tease out as you sort of move away from the Chau Chak Wing Museum?
Yeah, I feel like they're all sort of beginning points. And I think any one of those kind of parts of the project are things that can be taken to the next stage or to continued with. It is the first time that I worked with a community in that way, to work with the staff. And so I think that's really opened up a kind of I mean, as I said to begin with, like communities are really important to me, but I haven't worked with a community in an exhibition of my work. I generally input into other people's exhibitions, but not in, so definitely I think there's so many things. And I think some of them are threads that have already started before that have come to this, and now, you know, hopefully I'll get a chance to keep working with,
It's a good way that you approach your practice. So it's like something that some people might think of as a like restriction or a containment. You're looking at it as an opportunity to collaborate, or like an opportunity to sort of like a porousness, which is really nice, and also I think ties into that feminist practice of being like, well, this might be understood as like a containment, but actually it's an invitation. It's an opportunity.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like in thinking about that sort of feminist tactic, it's like, I'm not going to just keep butting my head against this thing. I'm just going to go sideways. And
I'm intrigued by what you're doing is sort of coloring volume.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in how you might continue to work with ideas like that. But also the color yellow and the color in general.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the yellow is pretty instinctive. I work with yellow a lot, and I've had comments from people saying, why yellow? Like, apparently it's one of those things also that I've even had somebody say to me, yellow works don't sell. And I was like, okay.
They do now.
But there's sort of, that was kind of instinctive. In some ways, I was also getting that idea of when I chose the yellow, and that kind of came out of, I guess, the things that were available as well. So I didn't dye the fabric. Thankfully, I didn't have to have found the color that I wanted. But it also made me think about, like, Helen Grace works a lot with yellow and is deeply passionate about yellow. So she was sort of in my mind as well as that kind of, again, sort of connecting to different practices. But in these volumes, I had the opportunity in 2017 to go to the Dan Flavin House in the Hamptons. And when I encountered that space, it made me understand the relationship between light, colour and architecture in a way that I hadn't understood before. It was almost like an audible switch in my head just went click, and I was like, I get it. And so when I came to these spaces, I was thinking, oh, well, how do you affect a building? How do you affect something, or change of light? And as I said, something that is quite light, as a light touch, not something that, you know, people are going to be coming to the building, working here for however many months and just going, oh my God, this place, I can't wait till this exhibition is over, you know? So I just wanted for it to be something that was quite light. And I think the way that we did a little test at the end of last year before we sort of committed to it, and the way that the colour, the filter works with the materials worked. It was something that was kind of, you know, people were saying, oh, you're going to do a different colour in each box. And I was like, no, absolutely not. But just kind of, just thinking about maybe trying something and seeing what happens, and then going with that, just that kind of, you know, you have an idea, but then you try it and see whether it works or not. And, you know, I'm working with this model-like outcomes in the gallery downstairs, but I do work with models a lot. I often make models as part of my process because I need to kind of understand what it's like to be in the presence of this object, or what it's like physically to sort of encounter it and be around it. And color overall, like I don't usually mix color. I usually, even when I do things like airbrushing, I don't mix my own color. I always layer things, or I think about the idea of color mixing in space, so that again, you know, if you've got like in the vinyls here, that you will encounter the colors differently depending on where you stand, and that's again about perception. So depending on where you come to the object through which angle, you'll see it in a different way, and that's again that idea of this kind of movement and perception.
Yeah, the other interesting thing, if I can maybe I just get to it there, is what happens at the different times of day. So it is a lantern in terms of there are skylights above and fluorescent lights to kind of adjust the lighting through the day. And into the evening, it is really quite intense because you're only relying on artificial light to filter through the building. And that's been a really wonderful thing to experience. And I remember also you talked about when we talking about the colour yellow is that it would throw lilac or purple shadows, and that was something you really liked. And so that's, I think, something you can experience as you go through the building. Yeah. Any more? I think we're almost done. No more? Good. Well, thank you all for coming on this beautiful day. It was lovely to see everyone's shining faces. And thank you, Consuelo.